Thanks. All right. Yeah, okay, great. Thank you, guys. So this evening, I would like to make the case for causality. The theme of this talk is rigor. And I know that sounds dull, but I want to make the case for causal identification and how we, as a group, can do better. So the political network community has been extremely successful at creating new theories. These theories have transformed, for example, how we think about the rise of power. For example, we think as a consequence of John Paget's work on the Florentine marriages, how much more we understand about the world. We also have been amazing at the collection of social network data. We've seen pioneers like James Fowler and David Lazar collect data that a decade ago was only in our wildest imaginations. And we have all these new facts about people, how people interact. But lo and behold, we still have a lot of work to do in terms of cause and effect. So with respect to cause and effect, our critics are fundamentally worried that we suffer greatly from omitted variable bias. And for our subfield to survive, we need to take those critics much more seriously. Crap. So, all right. So our critics are asking questions like, if your friend jumped off a bridge, would you jump too? So in Shalizi and Thomas's 2011 paper, they claim that homophily and social influence are typically confounded. And I would add that this problem is even worse, because lo and behold, individuals are more likely to be influenced by similar others. So what does this mean? Well, it's well known that omitted variables often bias regression results. And it's not like the rest of political science does not suffer from this problem. But we are particularly susceptible to it. We do know that individuals want homophily, and it's hard to argue that we haven't excluded relevant variables. Do we really understand all the selection process for social networks and the social environment? If not, we do probably suffer from omitted variable bias. So what do? A couple of solutions. Well, the standard one is include all appropriate control variables, or do something that proxies for that. But that's unlikely to solve the problem or pacify our critics. The second one is, we hear this all the time, generate better data, randomize over the network. And you know, some scholars have taken this to heart. James Fowler, David Nickerson, even myself have been doing experiments on social networks, trying to see what voter mobilization strategies are possible and what work. Sometimes you even get lucky, and you can find an exogenous source of variation like an instrument. But some networks are not suited for experimentation for either ethical reasons or practical reasons. So today, I want to argue for a third point, which you should all rejoice in. Use the data you already have. And lo and behold, I would like to introduce you to a technique called sensitivity analysis. This is a technique that I think we can respond to our critics and we can continue to use our observational data. Sensitivity analysis provides the threshold for how large the influence of an unobserved factor would need to be to obscure the main effect. This would tell us, for example, how large the latent homophily would have to be to invalidate a social influence finding. The canonical example for sensitivity analysis comes from lung cancer and smoking, an instance where clearly no randomized experiment is ethically possible. So here, for cigarette smokers to not develop lung cancer as a consequence of smoking, there would need to be an unobserved variable that occurred 9 times more frequently in the smoking population. That's unobserved. Come up with that one. So many of you have read criticisms of James Fowler's work, and in fact, particularly the work on obesity. A recent paper by Tyler Vanderweel, for example, finds that in order for James' result to disappear, there would have to be an unobserved variable that occurred 3 times more frequently in the obese population. That's unobserved, unmeasured. To put this in perspective, for most of you probably don't let your children be exposed to lead paint, and that's good because that's sensitive at only slightly more, 4 times. In the social sciences, we have yet to find something that's less sensitive than 2 times. So as a result of sensitivity analysis, we can have a lot more confidence in that obesity result, and that's really driven by social influence. So I want to make the case here for robust influence. Whether with sensitivity analysis or other methods, I want to make the case for robust inference and not merely to respond to our critics. I think that we can do this by moving towards the direction of taking causality more seriously. We can examine the instances where there is and is not influence, and it will allow us to generate new theories. So what if there is strong evidence for social influence? Well, that's great. We silence many of our critics. And then we can begin to theorize about the instances influence occurs, where it's larger or smaller. And what if we're wrong? So What if there's limited evidence for social influence? What if we take these sensitivity analyses quite seriously and we come up with extremely sensitive results? Well, that's okay too. It generates whole new theoretical avenues for us to pursue. In particular, we can ask questions like, are people sorting themselves into social networks with higher levels of homophily than we ever imagined? And then, why would individuals prefer these networks with homophily, particularly if we see limited evidence for social influence? So here, the case for causality is as follows. It allows us to develop new theories. Thank you.